all to a certain rules and regulations. As attendees, you will have very restricted rights. You can only see and listen to the presenters and see how many other participants join the meeting. You cannot unmute yourself while the presentation is running. You may use the chat box once allowed to do so. Raise your hand for any query, that too when the presentation is over. If one is found violating the rules, will be immediately removed from the meeting. Now I request Sudipto Ghosh to continue with the presentation.
Sure. Thank you for giving me this platform. So I'll just share my screen, and now let us continue with the presentation that I am here to give all of you. Is my screen visible? Just a quick confirmation.
Yeah,
Hi. So good afternoon or good because you may be joining in late and even you may be watching this recording, and good morning to everyone who is joining in live today. Today, I am conducting this webinar around APIs, and the topic itself is like a little bit heavier, like different paradigms and inter-service communication and stuff like that. But let me break down everything in small pieces, and we will go over the different topics that we might cover when like building all of these things. We have to build up the foundations for understanding what we are talking about. And the series our college has organized this webinar series, so I feel it's very much useful for everyone who will be joining in today. And if you are going to build out any products in the future, uh, this might even be very helpful in that sense as well. So let us begin with the thing then. The topic is APIs 101, different paradigms and inter-service communication. A little bit about myself because before I dive in, because there might be some people in the meeting today who might not know me personally. So I am in a semester 4, so second year student of computer science honors at the college. And apart from that, professionally, I have 2 years of experience in software development engineering and software engineering roles. I have some experience in building scalable products. What I mean by scalable, I'll come across later in the presentation. I have some experience in system design and implementation as well. Currently, I am an open source fellow at MLH under the University of British Columbia, Canada, under the mentor Jordan Harmond, who is currently working in the TC39 committee, which is like the formal committee for defining the JavaScript language as in the formal language as itself. So if you have anything to talk about open source and any doubts regarding that, you may reach out to me. And also, I'm a Postman student expert, a Vonage Voyager, and a community volunteer at Internet Freedom Foundation. So let's look at the agenda, as in like what all topics we will be covering today. I'll be covering some introduction, as in what the topic is about, then the types of communication that may happen. We will be talking about networks and some design patterns that may go into building something. Like if you are building a technology, building an application, and have to get everything talking to each another, so that is where all the communications come in. And there are different topics within itself, like different types of communication that can happen. We will be talking about all that, and in the end I'll be taking questions and you can ask me anything. So without much ado, let's get started. So regarding the introduction, so topic was APIs 101. But what are APIs? They are application programming interfaces that you may see here. And these are like the formal definition. If like you have some server or any service, what is a service I will be coming over, and it does not have to be a physical server itself. So anything, any logical piece of computation that happens has to be done by a service. And like whether you are building a product or application, you might want your application to talk to another service, or like use something that is already implemented and being done by someone else. Like if you are sending an email from your own application, like if you click on forget password and then an email gets sent over to you, there is a lot of communication that happens at the back end. So all of those are achieved with like application programming interfaces. They might not be totally based on networks. Like I have shown here some figures that you may see that I am sending a request and I'm getting a response. It does not have to be like that. It may be built in into the software itself. Like you import or have a header file or something like that, and you are using some formal definition like the function prototype and all from that foreign library you are using. All of that combined is the application programming interfaces. It's a contract basically to any other service that you might be interacting with. And if you are building a service that will provide these services, you must implement one of these in one or any other way. So like in this presentation, we will not be building APIs, but more so talking about the idea itself, as in how it came about, and like how is it important, how many different types of uh, services are there, and like how all they can talk and things like that. So it's more about a theoretical big picture, if you may. So because it is about the different paradigms and not the exact implementation details for each type of communication you may talk about. So we will be talking about the theory here. So now we got into the services. Like these are the logical separation between things. Each service that may be running, it will perform some specific tasks, and it will maintain separation of concerns. Now this term separation of concerns is important because like in a production application where where there is performance and there is security, and like there is a many things involved there, you don't want one particular service or like particular server application to do everything that you want to do. That will be covered in some like monolith architecture. Like if you are trying to do everything in one application or one service, like sending emails, sending OTPs, performing authentication, if all of that is happening in one single application, that might be something called a monolith. But like nowadays performance is important, and that does not scale well. Now scaling well means you might have different requirements. People may be connecting to your service from any part of the world, and like if there are many people connecting, there will be load on the service itself. So sometimes you have to run different copies, multiple copies of your services. Like the same, here I have a send OTP service, so I might have to have running 5 copies of this server, or might as in this may be a virtual machine as well, but there should be 5 copies of that so that the load is balanced within them. And these will be self-contained. Like if I am dedicating this to sending OTP, it should not do anything else. Like it should not access my database that might be containing some of my users. No, it should not do like that. And these will be black box models. Now what is black box? All of these terms you will be coming across as an you go into the industry. But like black box will mean you will not be able to know the implementation details. The person or service or the consumer, any company that will be using your service, they do not need to know the implementation details. They just need the interface, as in how do I communicate to your service and what do I get out of it. This is important for them. And these particular services like the send OTP or is this manage user service, themselves might be made up of many other services, and these are very important from the system architecture. Like if you are building something like WhatsApp up from scratch, there will be many things that are within that. So these are the services, and we will be talking about like how they can communicate. Like you can see that I am sending the phone number to from one service to another, and it is giving me the message ID that the message has been sent, and this is the ID of that. So now let us talk about services and things like that. Now how do we communicate basically? Here we come across the classification, like different types of communication. So this is a simple very simplified version of what I will be talking about. Between services, when you communicate something, there will be something called synchronous communication and asynchronous communication. We will be talking about that too. But Just for classification, there is a synchronous way of communication where everything happens over like the HTTP protocol, and REST and GraphQL are very popular industry options out there who use synchronous communication like between services. If you're talking from one server to another server, like one, it is not about like the client, that is the website or app that you have worked, and there is a backend not between them but also between backends. So this communication, REST and GraphQL, are some of the popular options there. There is also another category called event driven and messaging. So here we can do streaming, we can do pub sub. All of these are very heavy terms, but we will be breaking down them. And webhooks and websockets all are there. So everything that event driven, like some new response has come in, or like some new transaction has happened, you have bought something, and you want everything to be updated. Like if you do an ATM transaction and things like that, you have an event, and then you want messages to be sent and things to be updated. Those are events. And then we have RPC, remote procedure calls, and some of the most popular options like technologies are like gRPC. So SOAP is very popular in finance and aviation industry. And dbus, when you are dealing with the Linux operating system, there is a lot of stuff that dbus does for you. And gRPC, Google had developed, so for performance reasons, because they have a huge cloud infrastructure and all, and one service has to talk to another service, so they developed that gRPC. Okay, that was a lot. Now let us dive into each category, and like I have a timer with me, so I will be reminded of when I go over my time. But let's get started with the synchronous first, then I'll be covering RPC, event driven, and messaging. Now let us talk about what do I mean by a synchronous. The word synchronous, it will be like things have to happen in order and in time, in order, that basically. So if I am like sending a request from one service to another service, it might get blocked, by in the sense it will not be able to do anything else in between this time before it gets the reply. And the server will also be blocked during that time when it is processing the request. Now there are many ways to get around this, and many popular modern languages and frameworks have gotten around this problem. But because the fundamental thing about this is, uh, you might do only one thing at once. Now there is multi-programming and multi-processing and things like that, but that came very late. And the the basic idea for the synchronous communication was drafted much earlier. So when you make a request, you might face some blocking, like you are blocked from doing any other actions. And yeah, that is my definition of synchronous that I am talking about here. And most of these synchronous patterns that I am talking about, they this communication, this type of communication happens over the network. So over the network, we use the HTTP protocol, that is the hypertext transfer protocol. And we need to know a little bit about it before we dive in, because uh, the REST and GraphQL that I will be talking about, they use the HTTP protocol very heavily. So in the first few slides, I showed a diagram where one server was sending a request to another server and getting a response. But how does that happen? So for sending a message through this protocol, let's say HTTP, we have to follow a formal method. So we have to have this method in front of it, like when it goes from our service to another service, this happens in the network. So we have to put a verb, like what do we want to do we want to get some information, put some information, post or delete. Like all of these are standardized and they have meanings to it. Like get will be mostly used for, like it's standardized in the sense, like people know what it is supposed to do. It is clear from the context. Put will be used for like updating anything. post will be like adding something new to it, or deleting a resource, or stuff like that. Like if there is a record in your database, application database somewhere, and you want to delete something, you may as well send a delete request, and like you have to obviously implement the logic for that. But in HTTP, these things will mean that, yeah, so the intention is that. Then we have this part, the scheme, host, and port. All of this identifies the service that it is running on. So like scheme will be the protocol that we will be using. Right now we are using HTTP, let's say, so scheme will be HTTP. Host might be an IP address, or like local host if you are talking about a service that is running on your current computer. It may be an IP address or any domain over the internet, like google.com or api.google.com. And port is kind of optional, in the sense if you are using a very well known protocol like HTTP, port 80 is reserved for it. But HTTP services may be running on different ports as well, like 5000, 3000, on whatever your application wants. So like port will identify which application we are talking about, which service we are talking about. So these will identify our target. The path will be like useful for this service to determine what thing do I need to give to you, that what are you demanding from me. So like if I want all the books from a library database, if I want get books, so the service can determine that, yeah, I have a get books request, and I have to send that. And optionally, there you might have seen something after the question mark in the links that you send. So all of those are query parameters, and they are like key equals to value pairs, and like separated by ampersand and all. So these are important when you are as in sending some data. uh, uh, this is one way of sending data, like specifying what data you want. Like if you want to, if you go to google.com and do a question mark q equals to something, that will be the query. So that was the first part of HTTP that we needed to get down. Now we have the HTTP request and response objects that we have to understand before we go forward. So whenever you send a HTTP request, something like this is sent over the your application, your operating system. The entire technology behind it sends this message to the other service. Like you can see, there is this post, which is a verb. Like this is the path, and we have HTTP protocols have versions, and all of these headers are there. Like these are also some properties. These are not case insensitive, like case does not matter, but like these are some extra properties that may help to identify like where this request has to go. Like you have the host and where it is coming from, what type of browser they are using and stuff like that, like what language they want. All of these are in the headers, and the data which we will be sending comes in the request body. Like this is like the structure of the entire thing, not enforced or anything. And response, the server will be sending back some status code, like uh, you might have seen 404, 500, 200, and things like that. So those are some status codes that are used. And like request, we have response headers as well. And if my response has some body, let's say if I go to our college's website, I will be getting the entire HTML page in my body. So when I send a request that I want arsdcollege.ac.in, it will be sending the entire HTML, and we will be the browser will be handling that. And if it is like a service, like getting all the, let's say all the blog posts or something like that, so all of the blog post information in some format will be in the response body only. So when we make a request and get a response, all the information that we need will be in the body. So that was a lot of foundation that we needed to go forward. So now we have arrived at the first way of like transferring information, and this is one of the most popular ones in the industry as well. Why? Because this is one of the most straightforward to implement, uh, the most straightforward way. So this is called the representational state transfer. Now state, what do we mean by state is like the information that the service that is calling the other service. Like if you have a mobile device or a website and you have a backend, the client, that is the uh, website or your application, will have some information. Like if I am viewing a bank's web page, so what are the transactions that have happened. So in the beginning it may not have any information for that, and it would request the server to, yeah, send me some of the data, like whatever the last 10 transactions. And if some of it comes back, it is now in the state. And now this state is the data that is contained there, and now the server does not need to know that whether my client has the data or not, or what data it has. So there are 6 foundational principles for this type of communication. Like it has to be stateless, but I just talked about state and then I am talking about stateless. Stateless just means in this context is like the server will forget about anything after it has sent the message. So like if I have gotten the if the server has sent me the list of transactions or the list of users or the list of employees, it does not need to know whether whether the client, the website or the app has the data or not. It is up to them to like maintain it. Like if I refresh and it vanishes, so all of that has to be taken care of by the app. So but from the service point of view, it is stateless. We are not storing any other information. It is a client server model. So like you have one of the consumers and the consumers of your service, and your service is the producer in this context. So there is a client server model there. There is a uniform interface. Like I said, HTTP is usually used for REST. It's cacheable. So this is interesting. Like you saw in the response, there were some headers, and like this there is this e tag header, and sometimes there is a expires header, something like that. So if the e-tag changes or the expiry time has come, so the backend knows that that information is not up to date, then it will query the database or generate a new response. Otherwise it will just the same response. Like if you have already asked for 10 transactions and nothing has changed, it will be sending back that, and it is and your service should be like intelligent enough to distinguish that, yeah, this data is already has been already sent once. It is layered. It should be layered in the sense that uh, when you are implementing something like this, uh, you should have different modules that are taking care of it. So you might receive requests, and those have to be handled, and all of the functions and methods that you define, all of those will be in layers. There will be different layers of like getting the information. You might even implement some authentication. And also there is code on demand, that is optional part of REST. Like you might even send code to the client. Like this is interesting because sometimes you might have a security feature that you would like to implement, that you would send the only the code for generating all the tokens and all to the client in like a response. So now the client knows the logic how to authenticate myself. Then the client can authenticate with the server and then do. Otherwise this is not entirely needed for REST. So now let us get to some technical stuff, as in let me show you some code as well, as in how do we get this REST implemented. So like let us assume that there is a service that is running on an HTTP protocol at localhost port 5000, and this is also a part of the path like API v1. And if you search about REST and the formal specification, it is like a standard to use version of your API, like because this will be something that you will be exposing to other services as well. So if there is a different version, so that might mean that there may be different arguments or different inputs that are needed, or the output that you will be getting from this service will be different. So it is really important to take care of the version of the API you are using. So like this will be the base URL, as in the identifier for my REST service that we will be building. And we will be defining some actions here, like some rest code. So get is a HTTP method, post, put, delete. I just talked about that. And we have some endpoints here, like slash books, and this ID colon ID, this like means a parameter. Like if I want only the first book in the let's say I have a database of books and I only want a book by its ID, I can specify that. All of these are called path parameters. And this is the path, and this is a path parameter. And like this slash books and this slash books is differing in the HTTP method. So here I will be getting all of the books. Here I can add a new book to my database, and then I can change some of the information in one of the books in the records. And I can also delete. So these are all uh, intentions of these are my intentions, what I want my backend to do. And now we have to understand how do we communicate from like one service or one website that might want to do all of these things, and how do we get it working. So this might be some code, and you don't have to understand all of it, because I will be walking through some of it and not all of it. But in a basic sense, I'll be talking about all of these uh, endpoints that we have implemented, the API we have implemented, and then how do we get the data. So this is a server written in JavaScript, Node.js. I am using the Express framework. Here I have defined like books and books ISBN, and if I want sales for a particular book, all of these can be fetched. And like my service is like for getting all only managing the books. So and I can add a new book, and update one of the information that is there in one book, and I can delete a book. So like this is some code that is there just for defining all of the different endpoints. And like the logic, what I am doing is, here I am just declaring this is in memory itself, so it is not coming from a database. And it's I am faking it, as in I am faking a database, and getting whenever someone asks me for books, I can send this array, and I will be happy to have all of the books in the database. Let's say in a real world this would be coming from a database. Then I can also search for one of the books by its ISBN if it is matching what I want. Like this is a path parameter, so if that matches I can send that one. And if it is like to create a new book in the database, I can push it to the array. And if I want to change something in it, I can update any one of it. So like that is my working behind that. All of this code will be available, of course, but like the code itself is not important, the idea is. And here delete, I am finding one book that matches the ISBN, like updating all of the books that are not matching that ISBN. So if I have sent that I have to delete one book, now that will vanish from the fake database that we have created here. So uh, how do we verify that this is working? So I'll just run this server. Let's say this is a service that will be running now. It is running on port 5000, and I can now communicate to it. So how do we do that? There are some industry standard tools like Postman, which allow you to like send in some HTTP request, and to uh, just see what is happening under the scenes. So like let me clear all of this. And here because I said that http not https we are using, and it is like localhost 5000 and API v1, this was my path. And books is the endpoint. So if I send a get request to this endpoint, I should get the information that is here. So if I submit this request, it will make a request to the server that is the through the API, REST API, and then I am getting some response. So let us take a step back and take a look at what actually happened. So if I zoom in here a bit and like if I increase this, so you see that I sent the HTTP request and then I got a HTTP response, and this is the response body that I got. And now the application that I am using for seeing all of this is intelligent enough to just get this request, the response body out of that, and then show me what data that I received. So right now I have received that there is a array and I have a book in there. So I have the first part is done. This is all thanks to this line 21. Then I can also get one book, like if I only want one book. So I only get, this is not an array now, this is just that object, that book object that I wanted the data for that. And we can also add a new book, like here I will be sending some request with a body with a message in it, and this information should now also be in my database because I have exposed that API from my project, from my service. So now you can see I have added a new object in there. And here again, if I go to the console and go to the logs, you will be able to see that I made a post request, and like this was the request data that I, the request body that I sent, and then I got a response and that had the updated information. And then again, if I go to the get a particular book, but now there are two books in the database, but I am still getting the particular one that I want. And you might see that there is a sales field here, and if I want only the sales for a particular book, I can define something like slash books id and then the sales, and then I should only get the sales information for that. Now this will be useful in things like if you don't want everything to be sent at once, like the request might get bulky and the response might be bulky as well. Now there is put also that we had talked about, like if I want to change the author, now the author has been changed uh, back right now. It was someone famous before, and now it is someone who is not famous. So all of that is working. I can delete the book number the ISBN 5678, and like now I only have 1234. So all of this is working. And in production, what you would actually use is something like a let's say uh, a website. So I have also created that for a just for a test. Like you will have you this is the API that you are connecting to, and you will get the all the data, and then you will be like getting all of this information out from the database, that ISBN, the title and all of it, and you can show it as a list. So if I go there and yeah, so I have to go live once, and you can see now I got a good book by someone not famous, because that is there in the memory. And how did I get this information? If I just refresh, you can see that there was some headers sent, and I got all of this information from the API. So this is how my service that was responsible for books was able to expose some of the logic, as in how to get the information out of it. So that is the concept behind it. So this was REST, and it is like the most useful and the most popular in the industry just because of its simplicity. Now comes GraphQL, and that replaces REST nowadays. And how did that happen, and where REST went wrong? Now, with REST, the problem is that if you have a lot of information in the database and you are sending everything at once, that will be something called overfetching. Like you don't want all of that information, and if that information is very bulky, then a lot of important time and resources will be spent in like getting all of that information, and maybe you will not be even displaying all of that information in your application, and that is overfetching. And there may be underfetching as well, like you want the sale data, the sales data, but once you need to get the books, and then you have to make another request to your service to get like the sales data. So like that is underfetching. You have to do n plus one request to get n request. So for every request you have to make an additional request as well. So with GraphQL, this was developed by Facebook, so it solves some of the shortcomings and inefficiencies. And this also works over HTTP in the sense we have only a single path now. In REST, you saw that there were different paths and different verbs that we are using different HTTP methods. Now we don't need to use all of that. We will be having a single endpoint, that is this GraphQL endpoint, and a single HTTP method, the post, and everything from that point forward will be only a single endpoint. So that took care of like documentation issues as well. Like otherwise, if you have many such different URLs to look after, that the documentation has to be good as well, so that the people know that yeah, these many links are there and I can get this information from this and others from that. It is also very powerful because it has a type system. You saw that we had to use like different HTTP methods to delete and update the information. Now GraphQL has something called mutations, like you have to change the data at the backend, right? So all of that you can combine in a single request and send it over, and those changes will be applied. You don't need to the consumer of your service does not need to take care of that. In the query itself, you can specify multiple ways as you how you want the data. So like if you want only the ISBN number for all of the books, you can get that. If you want only the authors and the titles, you can get that. But in REST, you will have the entire data with you, like the ISBN, whether there is a rating, whether there is a sales price associated with it. So that can get a little bit bulky, so that will be overfetching. So with queries, we can have something like this is just an example I'll be showing you in action as well. But like you can search for some book with ISBN, let's say 1234, and you don't want the ISBN because you know the ISBN, because obviously you are querying for it, and you don't want the author details, but you only want the title and the sales amount. So if you send this, now your service or the server that you have implemented, that can reply with something like only the title, that is a good book, and the sales amount that there is. So for this, this was REST. Now I'll be changing the branch I am in, the folder I am in, and I'll go into GraphQL, and you will see from the client perspective, everything remains almost similar. This part is same with REST, and here only one thing has changed. I am just querying for all the fields, and the only one endpoint is there, nothing else. Here in the server side, there have been major changes that have been made. First, we have to define this. Obviously, there is this fake endpoint here for a fake database here for books, but like we have to define some type definitions as well. GraphQL is very powerful in the sense, you if you want to have something, like you will not run into issues like if I want ISBN, it must be there for each record, otherwise it should throw an error. Like if it is a primary key in your database and somehow there is some server is giving you something with the ISBN that is null, then your mobile app or website may crash. So that does not happen, and this might happen with REST, and you have to take care of it yourself. But with GraphQL, this is taken care of you at the server side itself. So like if I want books, that I will have a list of books, and each book will have all of these three properties mandatorily. I have used the exclamation mark. Again, this is not about the technicality here right now. I'm just showing you how it is like done if you are using this technology. And like sales has an amount that is an integer, And for each query, if I am getting a query for books, I can just return the books that are there in the database. Otherwise, if I am getting a particular book request, then I can search for it using the arguments that have been given to me. And if I am to add a book, I can define that mutation as well. So this gives you some major flexibility in the sense, like now the client will have to as an specify what they want exactly, and then only you will be sending the response. So there will be no misunderstanding, miscommunication between services. So I'll be running this kind of application as well, which uses GraphQL. So here I have started the GraphQL application, and you might see that I am taken to this UI. So one thing good about GraphQL that Facebook engineers have made, that they have given us this playground where we can just run any query and we will be getting some of the response. We can test out that if my uh, service is working or not. So here I submitted a query for a ISBN. The books only I want the ISBN. I can also want the title in it. As you can see, it auto completed. And if I go to docs, it has just it has made everything ready for me. So if there is any deviation from this contract, like if I am wanting some ISBN and there is some record in the database which does not have an ISBN, this will throw an error. Like this is a good thing in the sense you will not have any bugs. And like here you can see I can also query, if I pass the ISBN as a argument, then I can also query for like a particular book, and I get all of this information. And if I want everything at once, I have to manually specify every field that there is in the database. And this might be a little bit verbose, as in you have to write everything out, but still it is a little bit safer to use. And this was like getting all the information. We can also add a new book, like then instead of a query I will be sending a mutation which will have this new book, another book by another author with another ISBN. And if I send that, you can see the now the data is the data reflects that there is another book. And if I run this again, like this query, then I'll be getting that. You can see I have a list of two objects. There are two ISBNs in the database. And if I go with title, I can specify what I want. So this takes care of the like the underfetching and overfetching issues. And this does not have any implications, any kind of implications for the actual uh, or what you can say the client, that is the website, because that still has this thing like a good book from someone famous 10, and you can see in the uh, browser console that now it went to the GraphQL API, but like I got the data. So nothing other than that, so I have what I need. So that is there. That was the GraphQL optimization over REST. These were synchronous. Like if you send a REST API request or a GraphQL, your server will be blocked for that time. Like it will first take care of all of this and then go forward. And if this is like a there is some mutation, or if you want to do some operation that takes much time, it will take more time, and you will be stuck on a refresh or something like that. The page the request will not be satisfied unless the operation is complete. So that was one major chunk of the things that we talked about. Like that was the synchronous part. And now we are in the gray area. So remote procedure calls are, why am I saying this is in the gray area? Because when you procedure calls, what do we mean by procedure calls? If you have a function that is defined somewhere in your application and you are calling it, it is going to the stack with some arguments and all of that. So that is like a local procedure call. That is you have a C++ application. If you have a function that you have written and you call that, you are calling the procedure. So that is a local procedure call. And the remote procedure calls just uses that concept, but like your server, the server should have the function. So there is a get all books function in the server, and the client or other service that wants that information, they will just say that I want to run this particular function on the server, and like get me the reply for it, the return value for that function. So how does this work is like, grpc was the remote procedure calls, the most famous uh, library nowadays is grpc. But like what it does is, it has a particular protocol, differs by implementation, but not http. It uses its own protocol that is based on tcp or udp. You will learn about all of this in your computer networks class if you take it. But like it is a completely different protocol, and there will be some code that will be written for on both sides. So both of them will have the contract, as in this is the format I need to send a request, and this is what I want, and on the server side, like this is what I am expecting from the client. And this is complicated a little bit, because when you are just calling a function locally that is in your application, that will be like very much simple. But like if you are doing this over a network, one computer or one service may be using a different architecture. It might be a mac or a windows machine or linux, and the data representation formats may change. One might be in python, other might be in java. The service, there is a lot of flexibility there, but like the remote procedure calls takes care of all of that. So uh, grpc, like as I said, that it is one of the most popular frameworks out there for implementing rpc. And this is the structure it follows. Like it has the entire tcp stack behind, in below it. It has the transport layer security if you are using https. This is optional. And one major thing, it is like it uses http2. I will be talking about it. But about, on top of that, there is this protocol, the grpc protocol, the core protocol. And then each language, n number of languages can use this grpc framework for sending. So a java app may send something that is a message, or it can get the return value from something that is written in c++. So this is pretty cool. And these messages will be very efficient, because of the use of the http2 infrastructure. Now in http 1.1, what happened, I showed you that before the rest, that it uses some headers and data and all of that. So all of them are sent as ascii characters over the internet. So over the network, all the ascii characters go. So that is one part of it. And in http2, everything is binary. So if everything is binary, you have an additional advantage of framing the messages. So in, if you take the computer networks class, you will be talking about packets and frames. So if you have binary, you can divide, if you have a binary data, you can divide it into chunks and then send it over the network. But if you have an entire message written in english, you have to send the entirety of it, otherwise it would not make sense. And this is why grpc or rpc is powerful in that way. And because this is compressed to a binary format, this will be not human readable. Like it will be binary and not english, so you cannot debug this, like what message is going, am I receiving the correct information or not. So when you are using http2, all of this will be there. But like everything, the http headers and body and the http method, all of that will be transformed into this binary frames. Headers will be separated, the data can be separated as well. So this will be the transformation that will be happening. But because this is non-human readable, this is not really encouraged. If you are using something like if you are exposing this to other consumers as well, like other companies might be using your application or service or api. So but they should know, right, that what is happening. So a very popular way is like you use either rest or graphql when you are talking to other customers, or like other clients that are external to your projects or your company or whatever project you are working on. If it is not related to that, you can use rest or graphql. But if like one, there is this product search service that is there, written in some ballerina language that is different. And like you can see that all of these other services are there, which might be in Go or Word.x. These are different programming languages, some of them might be fictional as well, but like all of them can communicate bi-directionally over http2. This is another great point. Like http2 we can do bi-directional communication, whereas in http the protocol itself, this is, it was a one way street. Like you send a request, you wait for the response, and then you get it back. But in http2 it is bi-directional. So let me just show you one example of how we can implement this RPC, remote procedure calls, using the gRPC framework. So I'll be again changing my folder right here, and I'll be starting PyCharm, because this will be like a Python project now. So here what I want to show you, let me go into like the presentation mode. Where did it go? Yes. So you see that there is this is the contract that I am talking about. There is this contract that there is a service called bidirectional. This is like the name of our service, can be anything. The both of the services know that there is a server response function that is there, that can be used by the client, that will have a stream of messages, like many messages. There might be different a list of messages that might be coming in. That is the argument, and it will return something that is also a stream of messages, and there is no implementation right here. So this is like a function prototype, if you may, that it returns a stream of messages and it accepts a stream of messages. And the remote procedure call, the stubs on both of the ends, that is the contract. This is the contract. In REST, the contract was the structure of the API itself. Like we have get, put, post. In GraphQL we had the queries and all. Here we have, like, we have to declare everything, like which procedures can be called by the client. And in the server, what we have done is, this is like just an example for it. We don't have to understand right now, but like it is a grpc server, you can see. And I am adding this bidirectional service that is there to the server, and I am exposing this API, the interface, on port 50051. And I'm then starting it and waiting for termination from the other end. And my client, which might be another service as well, that has a function called make message, and it will make these 5 messages. As in we have to encode everything, because RPC will be binary. So everything has to be made as an into an object. Then I'll be just printing it onto the console, just to see that what is happening. But then we have a send message function that will call this get server response. But you will see that there is the definition for get server response is nowhere in this code, but it is only there in the proto file, this protocol or protocol buffer, this is called technically. But like this has the get server response, this definition, and the client has no clue as in how to get this. But the grpc framework that is below it will take care of it. Like it will run everything on the server, and it will run this code. This is declared in the server, it will run this. And in the grpc, this is the local host, this is the 50051, my server is running there. Then with that I can send the entire message with it. So let me now get out of the presentation mode, so that I can show you uh, how this is working. So I'll go to the terminal, and like I'll create 2 terminals. Yes, I have 2 terminals. I'll run the server on one of them. Let's say python server dot py. Now this is waiting for a client to connect, and I do client dot py. And you can see the server, the hello server sends the first, this is like hello server sending you the first message. From my client, I'm sending the first message, second message, up to fifth message, and now hello from the server is coming, that the server has now received that message and is now also sending that back. So the server has received all of these messages. So we have achieved what we set out to do, as in like sending one message, that is from the client. I wanted the get server response that was there defined in my server over the network. We achieved that without the client knowing about the implementation details of it. So that is the API for that, using remote procedure calls. So this is also one paradigm, as in one way to do it, the inter-service communication. And now this is like the most bulkiest part of my presentation. And why is it bulky? Because this is actually very important in enterprise and in corporate, where there is a very load of data. There might be big data as well. There we have to like prioritize what we want to do. And like some in some of these cases, whether my thing gets done, like my API, my service gives me a response, may not even be important to me. I just want that if something happens, like if something crashes, any server crashes, like then something should happen. And if there is a transaction made like at an ATM, everything should work with messaging, and this will be asynchronous now. RPC was a gray area because that depends on the implementation on the server side, like whether it makes another process and does everything processing in that, or does it hold itself and block itself and do the code there. So that was a gray area because there was a benefit of doubt. REST and GraphQL were synchronous because they will block the execution. Now these are asynchronous because they will not block any execution. You can send 10 requests at one go and not wait for any of them. So at one go you can send 10 requests, and that can be like received by 10 different services, and each one of them may do something different themselves. So like this is the cool part about it, and this is important in cloud as well. So that is there. So the first strategy is event streaming here. Like event will is something, a logical entity, you can say that if something happens and the services will publish it to a stream, like say a reverse stream or any queue that will be there, it will be sending that there, and forgetting about whatever happens to that. So like if I have a new response on a Google form, or like some new person joins this meeting, I can set up something that would take care of all of that. So, but I don't need to rely on anything. I will just let everyone know that this has happened. Someone has joined my meeting, and then everything else can happen. Like right now in the Google Meet platform we are using, if someone joins, you can see a different a new record is added to the list of participants, and their stream, that is the audio and video, is connected to our meeting room and everything like that. So that is event driven. And my API can publish all of the events to a event stream, so it will be like a notification for everyone else, all of the services that are there. And if any other service wants to do something with that data that is there on the stream, they can subscribe to my stream, like the topic itself, and then take some action on it. So PubSub is one of the topics that is most talked about when we are talking about events and message passing between services. So it is publish subscribe that I just talked about, that there will be a topic, that will be a channel that has like it can be a queue of all of the different messages that will be receiving. Like if let's say the topic is COVID, and that there might be different messages sent from the authorities that Now this much these many people were affected today, and on the next day we will be receiving another message. So all of that topic will be organized, and if there is some entity that wants to use that message from the event stream that is happening, I can listen to that. I can take that message from the stream as a subscriber. So then I can do something, like if I want to send a message, like right now I am receiving some telegram messages saying that covaxin is available in nearby, so I can have that. So some publisher some event has happened on the server side, and like that notification has reached my application, which is uh, sending all of these notifications to all of the subscribers. So like that is why I said that this is like one of the coolest things also. So here the technologies are a little bit different. We have something called a message broker. We don't need to know about the implementation details as well, but it is all about the idea itself. So there might be a website where you can purchase things. You can have a mobile app. So customer may submit a question or like a particular product, or there might be a transaction that is happening. So you can see all of these events like new order, a question, some return has happened, or transaction has happened, and there should be a broker or a bus from where I can get this will be like the topic. This event router will be the topic, and there might be different consumers. Like some of them might only want the new order, like this. If this is like not a warehouse management database, if it is like a orders database, the all the events that are related to new order should be relevant to that service. And for the stocks we may have another service, like that is the concept right here. So here what will be happening is, like, consider these two as databases, and service one wants to do a job, and like it some business data has come into the some employee has joined the company, that record has been added. If I save that and then I send the event that yes, a new employee has joined, now from this pipe or queue or message broker, as technically it is called, the other service can listen to this particular pipe and say, okay, new employee is the event type, and now I should have to do something for the new employee. So they might the service might send an email or a message or a WhatsApp message to the new employee with the data. So that is the concept behind it. Like some events will happen, and then we can do something based on that. So for this also I had just have a short demo for it, like how we can implement that. So I'll go into this different folder. Now when we are using something like message queues, this will use some other protocol by itself. It will use the AMQP protocol, not the HTTP protocol, the advanced message queuing protocol. And this is one of the reasons, like all of this should be used inter-service, not to the public should only see the rest or the GraphQL. And all of this uh, as you see that all of these optimizations that we have made in terms of reducing the message size and the everything, that will be done on the side of the backend, that where you have different services to communicate with. So right now I am using the advanced message queuing protocol library for JavaScript, and I am saying that there is this local host, the service is running on that using this protocol. This will use some predefined port number that there is, and this will be inferred by context. And like what this is doing is, this is like the event emitter. It will publish an event, uh, whatever event that comes into this particular code, and just publish it into the channel, or the message pipe that there is, the message queue. It will just publish it, and then if anyone else wants to listen to it and subscribe to it, like you can see that I am consuming if it is like there is a queue, and for each thing that is in the queue, I am binding to that message queue that there is. If a new event comes in, and if, like, let's say this is the event type magic.critical, this is the event type, then this should happen. Otherwise, I am just printing out what type of event happened. So here you can use a switch case or a if else if. So if some a new employee has joined, so this will be the event type there, and then your service can take the step forward from there. So here I'll be running both of these applications and showing you how this is implemented here. So here what I will do is I'll run this emitter that will be like emitting the event, publishing the event. What type of event I will be publishing is, like, let's say India dot there is a critical event in India. Let's say second wave has started. This is like the message. This obviously in a real application, what we will be doing, like, if there is an in any error in the try catch block, you can put it in the catch block itself. Whenever there is an error, submit this to the errors queue. And like, if there is a new transaction, submit it into the transactions queue. I am submitting everything to the india.critical queue, and the message that I am attaching to that is second wave has started. So this has been sent to the message queue, but there is no one that is listening to this, like, message queue. Like, there is some message broker queue, the pipe, there exists some logical pipe, it has gone there, but like there is no one to use that. So I'll use the listener that there is. This is the consumer, the emitter will be the producer, and this is the consumer here. And I can like listen for any critical event. But now you see that this is the problem with the event streaming. Like, that event had been sent, but like there was no one to receive it, so it expired. There might be workaround around this, but I like, now you can see, because this listener was there, it received this india.critical message that second wave has started. And if I send something, like I am sending an empty message, and this will be like that magic.critical event, if I send. So this other this is magic, this message gets displayed here. We can do anything else, like we can delete something from the database or add something to the database there, that is free way given to us. But like this listener, there should be at least one listener in this architecture. If we are doing this, like here, if we have, there should be at least one listener who is listening to this message queue. All of this, whatever topic we are sending it to, there should be at least one person or one service that has subscribed to it. Otherwise, if you send an event, that will go unnoticed. So that is one problem with this. So uh, yes, with that, like I have covered like most of the stuff that I had. And just for a bonus part, I have added this webhooks. So you saw that this was the messaging, like one message has been sent. So this over the network, like this message can, that india.critical or magic.critical event will be received by everyone, every server that is there in the data center or any machine that is there. And the machine or service that has to do with that, they can listen to that india.critical topic and then take action. Otherwise, nothing like that. So that was messaging. And now we have webhooks. Like, this is a notification style of doing things. Event, we have an event, and if we have an event, we can send a notification to another application. This is also interface, so that is why this is also a type of a API design itself. So like when you have a new form response in Google Forms, a new Google sheet, a new row is created in your Google sheet, that this information has come. So this is the sense, in that sense. And like if you have something like you have something, a sensor set up for sending you temperature data and all, it will be like getting the data and sending a notification to your service that now this is the temperature, after 1 hour now this is the temperature. You will be receiving all of these notifications. In the backend there are some events happening on the basis of which you are receiving the notifications. But yes, these are there, and these are called reverse APIs. But because in APIs, what the client has to make the request to get a response, or the client has to submit it to the event stream, or client has to make the remote procedure call. Here the server will just let us know that something has happened, then now my client can do something. So a good example for that is something called Zapier. So here you can see there's also a service called if this then that, like IFTTT. So like if you receive anything, if your Domino's pizza has reached the door, you can turn on like the light or anything like that. All of that is based on this concept only of webhooks. So like here I have defined whenever there is a trigger, like there is a new record added to a form, then what will happen is there will be a post message that the post there will be a post request over HTTP I will be sending over. And record ID, name, city, like these are all for, this is the form that I will be filling for just for an example, that name, mobile number, address, etc. are there in the form. And when someone fills up this form, I can like send them a email back or send them a message on WhatsApp or anything. I can automate that. So like this is the that part. So for this also I have just this is like the last demonstration for the day. Webhooks, I went into webhooks. So like this is the most simplest one of them. Like I am just exposing one webhook endpoint from my client side. Like this is the client right now, this is not the server. My server is this service, other service called Zapier, who is doing everything. And the Airtable service, whatever that is, I do not need to know about that. But on the client side, I just have this slash webhook endpoint, and whenever I request a data to this webhook endpoint, I should do something. So now I'll be closing this out, and the emitter listener stuff is done with, and I'll be starting this webhook server. Right now it did not find the module, of course, because I changed the folders. I'll just run npmi. So if I uh, sorry, but yeah, now this server has started, and I can go ahead and make some request to it, like from my uh, postman. What I can do is I can make like a new request and do something like I can copy this and to webhook I'll be making a post request, like say the body will be like a raw body of type JSON, and I can send a message that is true. If I send it, it will just send me a okay back, but in the console you can see I have received this message. But like I want this to be exposed to everyone on the internet, because now this Zapier service will be connecting to it. So I'll be exposing this over the internet, so everything that is on port 5000 will be having a different address. So this like this ngrok tool uh, created a new uh, this created a new domain for me, like this part, this is unique for my application, and now I can use that in my Zapier code. So here I will be changing this, and now this is the domain for my application. My service is running on this domain, uh, and this is the path for the webhook, and I can click on continue. Now I can test that action, like it will get the last record in the database. And if I go there, you can see that I received all of this information. And now if I just fill out this form very quickly, A B C D and 1 2 3 4, and let's say Kalkaji is there, and there is nothing there, and Delhi is here as well, and 110048, let's say. If I submit this, then it got submitted. And here I when this I have not turned on this app. That was a mistake on my part, but like I have to now do this once again. I had not turned on that integration for that time. That code was not running, so that is an error on my part. So like if I do this now, this should work. Like this was sent, and when eventually when this when the this is they also use a message broker at their end. So when this message comes to this zap, this particular webhook, that will be like done on their end as well. So like this ngrok tool also has this nice interface for like seeing whatever thing that got sent to me. Like the server sent me this information last time when that test run was done. But like that was also possible of the webhook, because like there is now a new interface into my application using this webhook. So this was the webhook part. And thank you for being with me there in this webinar. All of the code that I just showed, all of this is available on this link that is shown right here. And if you like have any questions or anything, or if you want to ask me anything, you can drop them in the chat right now, or like email me at this email address, or reach out to me on GitHub or Twitter. Also I sent Shubhang the link to it. And like this was like my this was my take on the topic that I had to present. So you can ask me any questions right now. I'll be like stop sharing my screen, let's say. And yes, we can do with it, I think. Shavang, have you dropped them in the chat? Yes. So if there are any questions at this point, you can just ask them. I'll wait. Otherwise, you can just mail them in. Yes, Shresh asks whether TensorFlow will be a module or an API. It will be a module when you import it into your like an application, but the exact details for it, like if you go under the hood and if you call the method tf.estimator or tf.data, like that is a way, that is a as a portal for you to interact with the TensorFlow core services itself. That like this is a service. TensorFlow is actually written in C++, but like if you are importing it from as a Python module, that is a module there. But like when you are interacting with it, like if you are running tf.evaluate TensorFlow evaluate this model, this machine learning model with this data, that is an API that you are calling. Under the hood, it you are doing a local procedure call. That is the thing that is going on there. So yeah, that I think that was my take on that question. Are there any other questions? Just let me know. Yes, I am on LinkedIn. I will just put down my LinkedIn profile in the chat itself. Like in case you even have a question and you are not able to frame it well right now, So you can always mail me, and I'll get back to you. And if it is okay for the organizers of this webinar now, if there is any other questions, you may reach out to me as well personally. And now, yeah, it's over to you guys.
Thank you, Shiriptu, for this informative session. Thank you, teacher, for giving us this learning opportunity. I would like to thank everyone for being here, hoping for more participation from side of you. Thank you.